So we're back after a couple of months off. The stairs are now in, so we've got really good access in and out of the loft, which is great. And today's task really is just getting all the floorboards down. Now once the floorboards are down, that will then allow me to put in my stud walls around the staircase. I've got all the plasterboard already in the loft. We brought that through previously through the big opening in the window before we sealed it up with windows and whatnot. The only problem with that is that when I do my floorboards over there, I've then got to move all this plasterboard that's next to me here over onto those floorboards to allow me to carry on with the floorboards over here. So today's video there'll probably be a lot of messing around, but if we use the time lapse a bit, speed it up, hopefully we should see a bit of progress by the end of today. Made a cup of tea, so I thought it would be a good time just to explain a little bit about what I'm doing. Now with this first row of floorboards, I've just had to trim a little bit off the back because the stud timbers along the back there, where we've got that cheek of the dormer that we built and we tied it into the old roof, it's not exactly square. I could have got away with it, but so that I didn't have any gaps along the back, I just had to trim a bit of the floorboard off on the edge so that when we butt them together we got a nice straight joint then all the way along this tongue and groove section there. When we put the next boards in, it's all going to be nice and straight until we get to the other side of the loft. We may well then have to trim a few bits down. Well, we probably will, in all honesty, because it's not going to be the exact width of floorboards. With these floorboards as well, is you do like a brick bond pattern. So what I'm going to have to do now is cut one of these boards in half. So we'll start with a half board, and then by doing half board, then a full board, then a full board, all the joints are staggered. So it just means then that your weak points and your joints aren't all in one straight line. I'm just using a bit of PVA glue between all the joints, and then I've just been using 4x40, well in fact I was using 3.5x40mm screws to start with, but I've actually gone over to the 4x40 because they got a slightly bigger head, and my only fear is using the smaller ones, although they're a really good screw, is if they did pop through, will there be any movement? I'd rather have the bigger screw head and make sure there's no movement in these floorboards, because there's nothing worse than laying your carpet down and then in a few years you get that slight squeak from the floorboards where maybe one of the screws is poked through or something like that. So belt and braces, we're going to use the larger screws. And then one other thing that you need to consider when you're putting your floorboards down is your cables. Now I did all this about 12 months ago, and obviously this year I haven't done so much to the loft, and so coming back you've got to be a bit careful and think, right, where are the cables, where are they going, and make sure all these are turned up before you put your floorboards down, because if you need to create a hole through the floorboard or shift them round, it's too late basically once your floorboards are down. So you need to make sure they're all in the right place, you know where you want your sockets, you know where you want your light switches, and as long as all those cables are up and you've got everything in place, that's fine. The other day I had to wire up the smoke alarm, which is over there, and it's making sure things like that are in place, because if you don't do it, you forget about it, you put all the floorboards down, you start putting your stud timber on, you remember it, and next thing you're cutting holes out of your floorboards, which is no good. And finally, the other thing I like to do is this. Before I screw everything down, I just drew some pencil lines where all my joists are, and whilst that keeps your screws neat, keeps them in a straight line, it also means that just for future reference, when you lift the carpet up, if you ever need to get access, you know where all your joists are, so you don't go whacking screws through any cables. And the other thing I do is draw or mark out where my junction boxes are. So below here I've got maintenance free junction boxes, so I don't really need access to them, but in case I ever did, I've marked there Wago box, junction box, and I got another one over there for my extractor fan wiring downstairs in the bathroom. I have got access to that one through the ceiling downstairs, but for me it's just good practice. I like to mark everything out, so if I ever have to come back up here in the future when I've completely forgotten what I did 10 years previously, it's all there, and hopefully it all makes sense. And I did exactly the same with the wiring over there. Where I've done all my wires and my cables, I've marked exactly which cable is which, and I've drawn a little diagram over there, and that's going to be in like a little behind a door in a cupboard, so I'll be able to open that up and gain access to all the junction boxes. And if I just come over here, you can see what I've done there. I think I showed you this in the previous video. So if you just look up the side there, you can see I've shown all the circuits, I've numbered them up, said what they are, and then I've put numbers on my junction boxes, and all my cables are all marked up as well. I like to write on them. You don't have to do that, but it just makes sense, you know where you are in the future. So I'm just using Gorilla Wood glue on the joints before I put them all together and screw it down. You would have seen me using this when I did the stairs, and I was using this in conjunction with the Gorilla Original glue, which is like the expanding kind of stuff, a lot more messy. This is perfectly ample for this job. You don't want it oozing everywhere. And all we do is just run that along the joint now before we put this next board into place. And then this board here, if you look around there, you can see it's got the female groove. That just sits over the male groove on the tongue and groove. See, I've just been plodding on with it. It's been a bit frustrating because I got all the plasterboard in the loft. I basically had to do as much as I could on this side, and then once I got all that sorted, move all the plasterboard over to the fixed floorboards here, and then I can work my way over there. Obviously there's a few little cuts to do around the stairs, but a lot of the time is taken in here. It's just moving my stuff around because I have to keep moving the tools from one side of the loft to the other. That said, it would have been a lot worse if the plasterboard wasn't in here, because I'd have to be buying smaller pieces or cutting large sections down just to get them up and then use them. So what I've done is good in the long run. It's just a little bit more work, and but there we go. We're getting on with it. I'm going to push on with this now for another hour or so, and then I'm going to have to knock it on the head then, and I'll be back in a couple of days' time. Right, so I've done everything that I can for today. I've run out of floorboards now, and that was my intention basically, so I didn't over-order them. I wanted to get it almost to the end. I know what offcuts I got left. I can measure up the gap that I got left, and hopefully now, I think it's probably 2, maybe 3 floorboards left I've got to buy. So that's it for today. Battery's about to run out on the camera, so that's good timing. And I'll see you next time I'm up here.